Excellent.
Welcome everyone, my name is Rob Brown and we are here with the fifth of our panels with some of the most influential people in the accounting world. We find ourselves in unusual times, and I'm going to let these three gents introduce themselves in just a moment, but we're continuing with a series of leaders of accounting communities, clubs, associations, networks, big and small throughout the world, and just asking what their take is on what is going on right now. So I'm going to ask these gents to introduce themselves. Shane, I'm going to start with you if that's okay, and then we'll go to Alan and then Mark.
Hello there, I'm Shane Lukas. I'm author of Putting Excellence into Practice and What's Next for Accountants.
Nicely prepared there, Shane. I like your preparation.
Yeah, all my prop from time, yes. Yeah, for 22 years now, I've worked with over 3,000 accountants through my business, AVN Inspiring Accountants. And in a nutshell, we are a network for accountants. We're spanning a few continents now as well. We train and coach them to run a much more profitable and enjoyable business, as well as teaching them the skills to really help their clients improve on a business growth advisory level. Thank
you, Shane. Nicely done. Alan.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Alun Morgan. I'm a director of Kudos International Network. We are a network of around 35 global firms now. Supporting them largely through audit quality measures. So we're a proud member of the IFAC Forum of Firms. We started Kudos, myself and Michael Scott, in 2012 from 0 members. So we're quite pleased to have grown to 35 members now over the last 7 years. I've also been advising small and medium-sized practitioners in various roles for nearly 30 years now, so very much enjoy working with accountants.
You've been at the game a while, and someone else that's been in the game a while, Mark Allen.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, it's been doing things with groups of accountants for some years, but back in March 2016 started a new venture, which is a community of UK-based accountants, so around 100 firms. Based geographically across the UK, and we have built substantial teams that support them in terms of technical tax, both in the UK and internationally, financial services, legal, insolvency and recovery, sales and marketing, human resources, health and safety, and so on and so forth. So they can tap into those technical teams and enjoy a revenue share with us as well on those items, but also we provide CPD as well for the partners and client managers and so forth within those firms too. And we have a very, very, very proactive exchange of information between members, which is very useful and helpful too.
Thank you so much, gents. And you have been probably doing non-stop Zoom calls and video because the game has changed over the last few weeks, hasn't it? And Alan, let me come to you first on this one. How well do you feel the accounting world is coping generally with this tsunami that's hit us?
I think, given the fact it's been probably the biggest change in my working lifetime, not just to the world as a whole, obviously, but to the accounting profession as well. I think largely it's coped very well. Obviously, some firms have coped a lot better than others, particularly those, not exclusively, but particularly those that have already made the move onto cloud-based working practices. So we have one firm we deal with in England that moved everything onto the cloud over the last couple of years and basically have not seen any change at all to their working practices. Others have seen some quite substantial changes, but some have coped well. Some have decided just to close the office for a month or two.
Yeah. Mark, you've seen some different reactions from different firms, but generally, how is the profession coping from your perspective?
Well, from our perspective, actually very well. I think it's rather polarized in that firms are doing very well or they're doing very poorly, and I think that really comes down to communication. Firms have got caught on the hop, as we all have to some degree. This kind of came at us out of the blue, and we just had to cope with a lot of changes, a lot of new legislation and initiatives by the government. And those firms that have communicated well, as I say, have fared extremely well, and they're taking on new clients and are retaining clients very, very well. I think those firms that have not communicated with their clients so well are struggling.
And that might be a theme that we come back to, Mark, that communication. But as a race, Shane, accountants don't generally cope well with change. A lot of things have stayed the same over the years. What response have you seen from the profession generally and how they've coped?
Well, I think in general, nobody likes change, do they? And they'll make it if they absolutely have to, or they'll die as a business or die as an individual if that's the case. And this has been a massive catalyst to change, hasn't it? So in terms of how I believe the accountancy profession is coping generally, I think that most accountants out there are being seen as an absolute hero in the eyes of their business owner clients right now, because they're getting them the funding, they're getting them the loans, they're helping them with all of the information. And that's been fantastic. It does come, though, at a cost in terms of many of the accountants, certainly I've been speaking to, have been feeling the burden, the overwhelm. So just before this session, for example, I run a sharing session for all AVN members to come in on. And the group I was, because we run the breakout groups within Zoom, the particular group I was hosting, one lady in there she was really taking the whole weight of her client's problem onto her own shoulders because they're struggling to, just an anomaly on HMRC's portal means that this particular client can't get access to the furlough funding, and he's risking bankruptcy. And of course, you know, why wouldn't she take that weight on her shoulders because she cares so much for her clients? But actually, that's one of the challenges that I'm seeing here, that yes, they're being seen as a hero, but it's coming at the expense of their own stress and pressures as a result. And I've got a couple of other observations as well, if I don't know how much time you've got on each
quickly, Shane. Yeah, thank you.
Certainly, I mean, we do a lot of training with accountants, and some of our AVN members have been with us for many years. Some of them have recently joined. In fact, quite a few joined during this COVID as well. And what we're seeing is a massive change between the people longer term that have really got a great team culture on board. They've got their team that have got systems that they follow. They've got accountabilities in place. They know what's expected of them. Have found that the remote working has been just seamless, whereas other people not so much, as you can imagine. And of course, the final one on there is the time as well, managing their own time, because accountants naturally want to respond to emails immediately or phone calls immediately, and you just can't always do that and get on with doing the work. So actually managing time, using those, you know, Calendly and those appointment setting tools, just managing, you know, bulk batch processing their emails, batch processing their telephone calls, has meant that actually they're getting so much more done. Yeah. But actually, you know, there's quite a spectrum there in terms of people who've got that control and the people who haven't.
Well, you've talked a little bit about the next question, Shane, there, which is the challenges that firms are facing. Accountants are wearing capes in a way, they are superheroes, but there is such a huge burden placed on them. Mark, let me come to you first on this one. How well have they coped mentally and everything else with some of the challenges? What are those challenges they're facing now?
Well, I think the biggest challenge actually has been time. I think Shane's spot on with that. And I think having the support of groups like the ones we run has been incredibly helpful to the accountants, you know, to be in a group and not be left on their own. But yeah, certainly time, signing up the shifters, as Shane said, the experience of our tag accountants has been that they're signing up new clients, we're signing up new members. I mean, we signed up 7, so 1 a week over this last 7 weeks of lockdown, you know, so it's an interesting trend that people are sort of looking for help. And as you say, Shane, rightly so, I mean, the accountants are the heroes out there at the moment. You know, they're really sort of stepping up to the mark. And okay, we've got to give credit to the frontline workers, the nurses, the doctors, etc., people in the supermarkets, the drivers. But yeah, in terms of business, the accountants are the superheroes. They're doing all the stuff, and the backup we give them really helps. But I mean, coming back to my earlier point, I think communication.
Has that been a challenge for firms, Mark, are you saying?
No, I don't think it's so much a challenge as an opportunity almost. I mean, some firms have struggled with it and some are better communicators, but it is absolutely clear that they need to understand their client base properly and be staying in touch with them. Spotting additional opportunities seems to be sometimes a challenge for accountants. I mean, I don't know that many accountancy firms actually have a dedicated sales or marketing person within their team. Again, we as a group assist them with that, but there are masses of opportunities out there now. For instance, in the areas such as health and safety, and
well, we'll come back to the opportunities, Mark, if that's okay.
So, yeah, of course. Yeah.
We're going to talk about the upsides of this, but every cloud. But Alan, let's turn to you. In terms of the challenges that firms are facing right now, what are you seeing? What's tough for them?
I think time, as Mark and Shane have mentioned, has been a huge issue. And I think the firms that have coped best have been the ones that have anticipated the questions the clients will want to ask them and actually get the messages out there before the phone starts ringing.
Yeah.
Now, when this first started around about the sort of 17th, 18th of March, I guess it would have been very difficult to anticipate everything at that point. But pretty quickly, the firms that have dealt with this better have been the ones that have actually had more time to actually spend and haven't had to answer phone calls at 10, 11 p.m. at night, are the ones that have got the messages out there by WhatsApp groups, by Twitter, by email, using something like MailChimp or whatever. Those are the ones that have coped with it better, again, because they've used technology to actually get messages out to their client base.
And that's the communication that Mark was talking about, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Shane, any challenges you'd add to what's been mentioned so far that firms are facing?
Yeah, again, just to add to what's been mentioned, HMRC have been a massive challenge for accountants, and no disrespect to HMRC, I'm sure they're absolutely snowed under, but of course announcements get made, business owners are then phoning the accountant up saying, how do I get access to this, I really need this, etc., and the accountant isn't able to answer the question, or I mentioned a few minutes ago, didn't I, an anomaly on the HMRC website, but their first line of support, it would seem, are simply just looking down an FAQ list, and if it's not on there, they're saying it has to be escalated, but that's where the bottleneck is. So HMRC, massive challenge for them there. Yes, there are other areas within the team and their clients, but I think, a lot of those things have been mentioned.
But accountants they're standing in that gap, aren't they, between the government and the deluge of information that is coming out, and then making sense of that to the business community out there and saying, we are the trusted advisors and we're showing you how this applies to your business. So let's move on then and look back. Maybe just over 10 years ago, we had a huge financial crash globally. Lots of lessons were learned then, hopefully, but that did change, turned the world upside down. What lessons, and I'll come to you first on this, Alan, what lessons do you feel the good accounting firms will have learned already from what's happened so far with COVID?
I think the importance of keeping on top of working capital in terms of making it, for the more traditionally based firms, making sure that they're on top of billing and debtors collectability, and of course for the newer technology-based firms, digital firms, if you like, the importance of collecting fees from clients on a monthly basis. But as I understand that, even some of those clients now that traditionally perhaps paid by direct debit are starting to stop those direct debits, and that's certainly a challenge that a number of the firms that I deal with have actually found that some of those direct debits are now being stopped. So I think keeping on top of their own financial affairs is something which is going to be vital moving forward, and not to be afraid to take hard decisions.
But have they really learned that from this? Shouldn't they have been doing that anyway, Alan?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say, is perhaps that's something that's been learned 10, 15, 20 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. And now
but some firms have been exposed, though, haven't they, with working capital? Some firms have not been set up properly and they've been laid transparent.
I think that's a minority of firms, I think.
Sure.
The ones that possibly may have been guilty at the moment of not being on top of those things, in my experience, is because they haven't had to be up until now, because they've got sufficient cash reserves.
Yeah. Shane, accountants learn well in that they get a lot of years in getting their qualifications and everything else. But what have the good firms learned from what's happened so far, do you feel?
Yeah, well, certainly what stands out for me is that they're discovering that they have to, first of all, look after themselves better, and don't just mean the practice, although that's incredibly important, but actually themselves as an individual, especially right now. you know, and some of our weekly webinars, we've been talking about mindfulness, which I know a lot of people dismiss as being a bit woolly, but actually been so vital right now. And when, you know, proper relaxing holidays are available again, you know, it's important to wind down, isn't it? And
are you talking about mental health and mental resilience there, Shane?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you know, that's been in a lot of discussions recently.
So
first of all, look after themselves better. And to do that, it means creating a stronger practice that is less reliant on them for every single answer. Otherwise, they're spreading themselves thin. Tapping into the technologies, of course. But also, actually, something that's come up a few times is that people are realizing that what they thought were their best clients aren't so much for many different reasons. Some on an ethical level, wanting to tap into funding that's maybe not something that they should be entitled to, wanting to twist the truth, but also how much, just the general quality and the likability of them. I think overwhelmingly a realization that they have to take much more of a genuine interest. You know, Mark mentioned the communication, understanding what the preferred type of communication their clients, you know, what's their preference in terms of, you know, not everybody likes to see an email. If I see a big email, I find that daunting. I hate reading lots of wordy emails, you know, and so short, sharp, punchy emails for some people, or picking up that phone, it can be the heaviest weight in the office for some people, or of course the technology that we're using now, Zoom.
Yeah.
But really, it's adapting and just being proactive.
Yeah, and I do want to ask a little bit later about how clients have or have not been put first and what this has taught us about the way firms communicate. But Mark, let's come to you on this. What lessons do you feel the good accounting firms will have learned from this?
Well, I think Shane was touching there just on the use of Zoom, and there were lots of businesses out there who probably hadn't even heard of Zoom before this crisis happened. Obviously, our accountants had used it a lot. I'm sure Alan and Shane's clients had with them. But one thing that provides is leverage. And a lot of accountancy firms were not necessarily fantastic at thinking in terms of leverage and how they could communicate with a number of clients at once. So there are plenty of technologies there, whether it's, you know, telephone conference lines, whether it's Zoom. BT do a similar functionality to Zoom, so do quite a few others, including MS Teams, for instance, as well, where we can sort of leverage things within our internal teams on a similar basis. And that's been discovered since people have worked at home. So I think the good firms and the lessons they've learned also is to harness technology. The ones who were prepared and further down the path of the digitised modern practice, I think have fared better, certainly. But also being able to spot the demand for value-added services that are out there. So I just was briefly touching there on health and safety. And you can bet your life a lot of clients didn't do a health and safety audit when team members start to work from home. So they should have done a risk assessment, and you could sort of see claims arising for repetitive stress injury, bad backs because they weren't sat at a proper workstation. Now they're returning to work. Obviously, there's even greater emphasis on health and safety. So within the restrictions, depending on the size of the firm. Similarly with employment law claims, there are just masses and masses of value-added opportunities that, you know, A, accountants can earn from, you know, B, clients need the assistance and the protection from it. And C, it makes the accountants, you know, stand out in the eyes of the client as well to see them being proactive. So there are three big lessons, I think, there that the better firms have latched onto and have embraced. So they're seeing this as, whilst it's a bloody awful situation that we're going through with COVID, you know, through the dark times, you know, the sunshine always comes after rain. The daytime always comes after night.
Let's hope so. Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I'm keen to know whether you gents think there will be, whether this is a reboot, you switch your computer on and off, and it goes back to how it was, or are we looking at a new way that firms are set up? Are we looking at a new kind of accounting firm, a new kind of accounting network, club, association? Is this going to change, or is it going to be a reset? Are we going to go to something very, very different? Like, Shane, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the quick answer is I think some will, some won't, unfortunately. Because right now, what accountants, certainly what AVN have been trying to encourage accountants to do for the past 22 years is step more into that business growth advisory role.
Yeah.
This has been for some a catalyst to move into that, but actually it's not a necessity to move into that. If you think about what most accountants have been still involved in, it's still compliance, it's still helping them get the funding, helping them get the loans, and it's really still within their comfort zone area. So yes, they've maybe had to deal with more clients trying to help them get that, but it's still their comfort zone remit of compliance work. So I think some will step up, but ultimately, yes, they'll all have perhaps had to tap into different technologies, etc. But I believe that now more than ever, it's no longer about B2B and B2C. It's that H2H, isn't it? It's that human to human, taking that genuine interest, really being there for your clients. I wrote down on my note in front of me, if you've seen the film Jerry Maguire, you know, the business he left was, we'll just stack them high, sell them cheap and work with as many as possible. He wants to move away from that, work with fewer people and have that much more genuine interest and care to help them. And that, for me, is what some of the better firms will be moving into. Yeah. And I also think from it, just even on a compliance point of view, rather than just producing, you know, even management accounts, but certainly the year-end stuff, there should be regular cash flow forecasts produced and much more money management advice given to clients so that they, you know, even if they're reinvesting money back into their business from their profits, it's being invested and spent in the right way. Yeah,
I can see they're going to make those changes. Mark, do you see a new kind of accounting firm, different structure of firm going forward? What have they learned from this in terms of how they set up their firm?
Well, I think prior to COVID, I'm sort of dealing with my own institute, sitting on the regional advisory panel for UK and Ireland. The examination syllabus is under scrutiny, and there's much more emphasis on IT, technology generally, you know, AI, all the robots, robotics, etc., etc. However, I think Shane is right when he talks about it's all about people at the end of the day. So yes, technology can bring in all sorts of efficiencies, but people want to deal with people still. So yes, use Zoom, yes, use the technologies we've referred to earlier today. However, you know, you've still got to develop those soft skills, and it is not about efficiencies. Yes, we can use IT for efficiencies. It is about effectiveness. So yeah, if you're looking at cash flows, by way of example, and managing cash flows properly, it's a value-added service. You're helping the client, you know, move forward, control their business better. And I think the focus of the firms of the future is going to be more IT orientated, but it's also got to retain the person-to-person skills and think about how they really add value to clients, properly add value, not just fulfill the compliance elements of the service.
So not a new firm structure, Alan, but the two answers we've had so far are just doing the things better that they have been doing before. Is that how you see it?
Yes, and we've spoken a lot about technology, and a lot of people speak about technology and the way that it should be used by accounting firms moving forward. But one of the things that I'm encouraged by some of the accountants I've been speaking to over the last 2 months is the level of effort they're actually putting into communicating with their own staff as well.
Yeah.
And I would hope that, bearing in mind particularly what Mark was just saying about the human element, and that's encouraging more staff to take on board the communication with clients in order to, at a higher level, in order to free up more time for the leaders in the practice. And I think the leaders in the practice then have to perhaps learn to let go a little bit more and trust staff, but also train staff in the soft skills that we've spoken about. And this is something that, you know, I've been talking about for the last 20 years, the importance of training staff in soft skills as well as technical skills, though of course soft skills are harder to train.
Yeah, well, it's a very good point. It leads us on to our next question. I want to talk about leadership, because when you look at the way most firms are led right now, I'm interested in any examples you've got of strong leadership. What does it look like? You've been leading your networks and communities. We've seen good examples and bad examples of leadership. But Mark, what do you think about the way people have led firms throughout this? Well,
we touched on communication earlier, Rob, and the ability to respond. Business today, and particularly over the last 2 decades, has become more and more about velocity.
Agility,
agility as well. We have to move very, very quickly. We have to get accurate, useful, and factual information, not speculation, to clients. We've got to get out there. But also, what has happened during this COVID crisis? Of course, we've had people working from home. So all of a sudden, when everybody's in the office with you, and you can sort of easily just say, oh yeah, don't forget this, don't forget that, remember, all of a sudden, obviously us guys work with firms, all over the world or all over the UK at the very least. So we've got used to having to sort of communicate with people in lots of geographical areas. So suddenly the good leaders, have come to the fore, where their communication skills and their ability to manage their team and give the necessary controls to their team, but with the right insurances that they sort of work within the sort of remit they should work within. It has really shown up, and I think that it makes a good leader when they have to manage people from afar rather than looking over their shoulder and being just responsive.
It's a good point.
They have to plan much better when people aren't there on site with them. Well, that's my personal belief, and not the other guys.
It's a different kind of leadership. Shane, have you seen, or are you going to see changes in the way firms are led after this?
Yeah, absolutely. On Friday, as it happens, so just a few days ago, I was interviewing one of our member firms there who was telling me about the fact that because he'd put the systems in place, I mentioned systems earlier, didn't I? Because he'd put the systems in place, his team have been able to seamlessly just follow the systems from wherever they are, working from their respective homes. And just continue. But the beauty from his point of view is he's been able to take a helicopter view and just look at, okay, how can we tweak the system so that we're giving the right levels of support to our clients right now through this? And he's changing the systems. That's filtering down to the teams automatically. They're following those systems. He's got all of his projects and his tasks, etc., on his CRM. I forget what his is called, but they all have those job tracking facilities in there as well. So his systems are being followed. Just on a different basis, though, because I don't want to repeat what Mark said, which was all relevant, and I completely agree with that. I'm also seeing much more leadership when it comes to clients. On 2 levels. So we talked there internally with the systems, but something that Phil mentioned, and certainly some of the others is without crystal clarity on what the agreement is that the client has with their accountant, it's left a lot open to interpretation recently, which means that maybe there's extra work being carried out that number one isn't being charged for. Now, some accountants don't want to charge for all of the extra work they've been doing. That's fair enough. But actually, that reduces the level of appreciation that they've been getting from clients, and also has increased the level of expectation of what they will get thrown in going forward. So that starts to backfire. So actually, many of these have been much firm about what is included, but also what isn't included in the service, and that these are additional. And also, in terms of being firm, a challenge that accountants have had for many years in delivering some of the business growth advisory services that I've mentioned is that many of their clients don't feel that they need that right now, or their accountant isn't right. And it's been much firm to say, look, this is what's going to happen. You are going to go bankrupt unless you sit down and pay attention to me. And they're being much more firm. They're selling the pain, as it were, and they're really opening their clients' eyes. Whereas previously, it's almost been, well, we can help you grow your business if you'd like us to.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So actually being much more of a leader in that sense.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about clients in a moment. But Alan, your thoughts on this in terms of how well firms have been led throughout?
I think it comes back to something which, in my mind, to to what Mark said, and that's the confidence of the leaders to actually delegate, and the ability of firms to delegate to staff. Because
it's hard in uncertain times like this to lead, isn't it? Particularly remotely, as we've said.
It is, and that's where trust. And if you had good HR policies, good recruitment policies in place, and good training in place, then hopefully everything will have followed through relatively seamlessly with people working at home. Because when you have people working at home, you have to trust them. And if you don't, that's when you start micromanaging, worrying, getting stressed, and the whole thing starts to fall apart at the seams a little bit.
What about the way you lead your networks, your communities, your groups, your associations, gents? Has that changed in all of this, or is it just accelerate the good stuff that you're already doing? Be frank, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, we've found our technical WhatsApp group is incredibly lively, because obviously things have been changing by the day.
Yeah.
So that won't go on forever, but for the foreseeable future, there will be lots and lots of changes. And therefore, we've had to be sort of working round the clock, really, to keep on top of press releases, keep on top, particularly statements from the government, from HMRC, and ensure that, again, we're not dealing with speculation. I see lots and lots of speculation going around various groups, and it drives me insane, because I think, look, what clients need is facts and certainty.
And you're talking about clients as the members of TAG, or you're talking about clients?
Yeah, I mean, our clients are the accountants.
Yeah.
But similarly, that we've got to then pass that on to our accountants to be able to pass on to their clients.
Yeah. What about Kudos, Alan? How well have they been led, dare I ask?
we found that we are having to be in much closer contact with firms, and it's something that they're appreciating.
Yeah.
Just to bounce ideas off. Also, in terms of, on the technical side, a lot of our member firms, particularly overseas, are currently signing off on their December 19 audit season and are having to adjust their financial statements for their clients, and particularly having to think about technical matters on the audit report. So we are currently fielding many queries on that. Just emphasising the need that firms need to remember that each case is different.
Yeah, sure. Shane, have you upped your communication with your members?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every one of our members gets regular one-to-one coaching support, and that part hasn't changed. It's not needed to. Some people may have increased the frequency, but actually from an interaction point of view, we established just after the lockdown began two 1 hour weekly webinar sessions. One is for non-AVN members, and we've had several hundred accountants consistently attend that. And actually for that, I've had panelists involved. The panelists are maybe an expert in the latest of tax, etc. But also many of our AVN members who are talking about what they've done, because it occurred to me that if I sit here saying, well, you should be doing this right now, it's not going to have the same impact as another accountant that's in practice right now saying, actually, this is what I'm doing, these are the results I'm getting, and I recommend that you do the same. So actually I established a panelist group for that, and that's had an amazing following. But also from our members' point of view, because we don't run the workshops where people come together and they're talking, we established a once-a-week sharing session where, just using Zoom, should I say, we can click the breakout sessions button. Many of our coaches are then in and facilitating each one of those breakout sessions, and that's been invaluable. People just burning issues, etc.
Yeah, it does frighten you, doesn't it? What we would have done had this have happened 10, 15 years ago, where we didn't have the internet, we didn't have Wi-Fi, we didn't have video technology like this. Would have been in the brown stuff, wouldn't we, Alan?
Absolutely. Technology has been an absolute godsend. Who knows where we'd have been 20 years ago with this? Well, it really just doesn't bear thinking about, really.
Yeah.
Personally as well as business-wise.
Sure.
It's interesting. Sorry, if I may just say, that's really interesting, Alan, because all these technologies are there, but as I say, sort of necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, this inertia disappears, and everybody starts using the technologies. And of course, people like us have been nagging them to do these things. And of course, when they get shoved into it, then it happens magically. So
well,
that's one of the positives. That's one of the positives.
It's been quite interesting. I've done a lot of webinars over the last 2 or 3 years, not just for Kudos, but for other organizations as well. And one of the things I've seen is the webinars I've done the last 2 months, and we've ramped ours up at Kudos, have been so much better attended than ones in the past. It's been untrue. Yeah.
Well, not just better attended, but have you found that your ability to deliver video conferencing, video meetings, video webinars, that's got so much better, hasn't it? Because you've just done a lot more of it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Let's talk about technology for a moment, fellas. I'm interested in what skills, new technology accountants are going to need to invest in after this. Shane, let's start with you on that one.
Certainly, they should be using, a CRM, some kind of practice management system at the very least, because the ones that are really being able to operate with all of their teams working remotely, they've got that type of setup in where people can just log in, they can see the progress on jobs, etc. They can pass work to each other because, most of the current CRMs now have got the cloud-based storage and those types of things. So that's incredibly important. Obviously, Zoom. I know Microsoft are pushing their Teams, but I think the favorite seems to be, certainly from my observation, is Zoom. And what else was I going to say? Yeah, if you've got some kind of project management tool. Now, personally, I use Trello, and there are many out there, so I'm not necessarily just advocating Trello, but what I find invaluable with Trello is that, yes, I have my own board that I manage, but also if I want to delegate something to one of my team, and I've used this process for many years now, because rather than, I'm in the office, I'm the only one in, but I keep pointing behind me to where my team would be just through that wall. If I go there and say, oh, could you just do this job for me? It's not urgent. You don't have to do it right now. I've still interrupted them. I've still messed up their productivity just by talking about it. So what I'll tend to do is delegate via Trello. I'll record a brief video on what I'd like them to do, set the expectations on priorities, what are the outcomes, all of that. And then that's sat in their Trello board. And then they can weigh up I'll talk about how its level of priority, and then they can take that off as and when it's right for them. So just having that more smoothness, but as Mark said, and Alan, the human to human side of it has to be, for me, the top priority. So yes, it sounds like I'm recording videos and delegating remotely, but actually, we all come together in our meetings regularly, and those types of things are incredibly important as well.
Yeah. Alan, what new skills or technology do you feel accountants need to invest in after this?
I think Shane mentioned Teams then, and I think it's some form of technology that enables mass, quick video communication. I think would be invaluable for accountants moving forward, because you can get the messages out there much quicker than even, say, messaging technology such as email or WhatsApp. By actually having a short session on something like Zoom or Microsoft Teams for a group of clients or all clients, we give across a message on particular government pronouncements. Then it can last 10, 20, 30 minutes. You can record it so that clients can watch it at another time. And to my mind, it's about using communication technology better. And I think video content is the way forward for that.
Yeah, sure. Mark, what do you think about new skills, new technology that accountants should be investing in?
Well, there's two areas really that I'm particularly eager to encourage accountants to use more and more. So we've been training our accountants for some time on very, very structured advisory. So I know Paul Shrimpling came and spoke at our last annual conference, and I said, Paul, just give them some guidance on what business advisory is. So we've actually got very structured systems, processes and tools for people to actually deliver advisory, which is built on a software platform. So that
advisory is what clients are really clamoring for, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah, but it's such a generic term in many respects, isn't it? It's so broad that we've got to be clear, and the client has to have visibility of what am I getting for my money.
Yeah.
And as our friend John Thompson very often says, you're all doing advisory, but most of you aren't charging for it. And this is the problem. If the client hasn't got visibility of what do I get for my money, if it's not productized, then they're not going to put a value on it, or it's not going to be anywhere near as straightforward to put a value on it.
Sure.
So yes, the skill of the practitioner, obviously, and experience has to count for quite a bit, but you know, it has to be done in a structured way. So that's number one. And the second one is coming back to younger accountants becoming more and more IT savvy, and the training programs and apprenticeships, you know, driving them to be firms to be more IT savvy, is actually drilling down, not thinking about what we're doing for efficiencies and effectiveness inside the firm, but actually looking at apps that certain business sectors can use. So going out and saying, how can we help introduce apps that will assist us in managing that company, make more turnover, more profit, more personal cash for the owners? Yeah.
Well, let's have a quick round, fellas, on client first. You've talked a lot about clients. Shane, you've mentioned the H2H, the human stuff. What has COVID taught us about the way firms have been or should have been putting clients first? Alan, let's start with you on that one, quickly.
I think what it's told us is the importance of being proactive and actually getting messages out there, so you're anticipating the questions before they're actually asked. I think traditionally accountants have always been reactive rather than proactive, and those, as I said earlier, those accountants that have managed their time well in the last couple of months have been the ones that have anticipated the client questions and have got the messages out there en masse before the questions have started to come through.
Mark, thoughts on what this has taught us about how clients are dealt with by their firms?
Well, I've always said that when you speak to clients, it gives rise to additional opportunities to help them, you know, to earn money, to help the clients make more profit, to save costs or whatever it might be. So I come back to communication on this, and the firms that are poor at communication are losing clients, and the firms that are good at communicating are taking on clients. Yeah. And you can absolutely see it completely visibly, and it's back to this polarization. If you don't get that right, then you're going to have problems.
Yeah, and Shane, Allen mentioned the proactivity. A lot of firms claim to be proactive, don't they? But it's not just saying we're here for you. It's not just even a quick phone call saying, are you okay? Because a lot of business owners don't know that they're okay. It's more than that, isn't it? So what has this taught us for you about how firms are putting clients first, or should have been?
Yeah, I mean, you're quite right in that everybody says they're proactive. If you Google any accountant's website, chances are it says we're proactive.
Yeah.
So, you know, for me, the definition is you are picking up the phone or having a proactive conversation without it being reactive on a regular basis. And I would recommend for that your best clients, you know, we help people grade their clients from A to D. Your best clients, your A clients, should be spoken to at least every single month outside of COVID-19 in general. Once a month, but as you also say, it's not just about, you know, how are you doing? How's the dog? It's actually having a purpose behind that call and having something that is going to be valuable, not necessarily self-promoting, but actually valuable to that client as well. Just asking them some teasing questions, finding out how they're doing in their business, etc.
Yeah.
I would suggest for your B clients, it should be at least quarterly. You see clients probably twice a year, and you shouldn't have any D clients. You should sack them.
Yeah.
You know, because they're not right for you.
Yeah, super. Thank you, gents. A couple more questions. I'm intrigued as to, and we asked this earlier about how firms are coping, but what light has this thrown on an accounting firm's ability to deal with change? We've never had disruption like this, and you've been in this game a long time. People talk about World War II and how that changed things. We had the crash in 2008 and that changed things, but any thoughts on how firms have dealt with change and what they're going to learn going forward? I'll just open that up to anyone.
I think generally the profession has come out of it looking very, very good and very, very competent. As I say, though, there is this polarization where you know, some have dropped the ball. I think the firms that were utilizing tech or were more advanced in adopting
cloud-based
tech already have probably fared better. But generally, I think the accountants have shown an ability to change when it was needed. There will be those who, old dog new tricks and all the rest of it. I'm 61 years of age, but I love new stuff. I'm fascinated by it, but we're all different, aren't we? So I think that it's shifted a lot of inertia. We all get, if we're not careful, we all get comfortable with doing this, everything the same way we've always done it, don't we? It's so easy to slip into that. And maybe it's just alerted people to say, well, we've got to keep aware of what is new out there, because the pace of change is not going to slow down.
I've heard that, Shane, from a lot of accounting firms, that this has accelerated stuff they were already going to do, but what would have taken them 6, 12 months, 2 years, they're now getting done in a matter of days and weeks because they have to.
I think my opinion on your answer in terms of their ability to deal with changes, so everyone can change if they need to, but the willingness level may be different for everybody. This has forced a lot of people to change that maybe it was on their should do list for a very long time and never made it to the will do list, and that obviously happened. But I fear that post COVID, there's going to be a new norm. For every single person, there's going to be a new norm which they will then become accustomed to. It will form their new status quo, and unless there's enough pain again or enough gain for them to want to change, they're just going to establish this new norm. I don't think it's going to put people on an ever-changing aspiration, if you like. No disrespect to people out there, but not many people like and embrace change. Mark says he loves new technology. I do as well, and I suspect many other people listening to this and on this will. But as I say, it can cause, as I said at the very beginning of this, it can have a massive impact on health as well. It's caused a lot of stress and anxiety for people having to undergo this level of change that they're not previously accustomed to. We all change at different rates.
Alan, we're all of a certain age on this panel, aren't we? But we've got accounting firms that are led still predominantly by the baby boomers. They're not used to a lot of change. They don't transition well. How do you feel they're going to cope?
I think that in some respects, accountants have been really lucky in some ways with the COVID crisis, because the assistance that the people, the clients have needed has been right up their street in terms of assistance on tax matters and assistance on financing, where I think that accountants can differentiate from maybe some of their competitors is by embracing some of the changes, not just in technology, but in finance providers as well, and going down the route of talking to more of the fintech startup type companies, such as the banks such as Revolut, Starling, etc., and some of the finance providers such as iRocker.
Is there going to be change, fellas, do you think, at association level, the professional association institutes, or even at your level, you lead networks and communities? Is there going to be much change there, do you feel?
I think there already is. I mean, certainly within my own institute, the estimate for moving to a digital form of examinations just before COVID was anticipated as being about 2 years away. In fact, it was done within a matter of days, as soon as the necessity arose. And so I think it's given us all a kick up the backside. I mean, I think when Shane refers to the new normal, and that's a phrase that is bandied around a lot. And as I said, I'm not a great one for speculation. I think we have to some degree try and second guess what might happen. But in the short and mid-term, none of us really know, in truth.
Well, hold that thought, Mark.
So we've got to be agile. As Alan said earlier, we've got to be agile in this marketplace.
Well, final question, gents. Let's get your crystal balls out. What comes next for the remainder of 2020 for accountants and the firms that they represent? Alan, let's start with you on that.
I think further investment in technology, those firms that have yet to invest properly in the cloud will need to urgently improve their, and sadly in some cases actually have a CRM system to be able to communicate effectively with clients, but also critically to actually keep on top of some sort of risk register for their own internal purposes.
That's interesting. What do you mean by that specifically?
By actually going through, almost entering into what Mark didn't want to enter into, was speculation, but actually thinking about what could happen over the next year in terms of second, third waves. Could this happen again?
Yeah.
What effect is that going to have on certain clients, and what effect is that going to have on the practice?
Yeah, business continuity for their own firm. Yeah. Got it. Shane, crystal ball, what's coming up for the rest of 2020 for accounting firms, do you see?
I think we've got to be very mindful that at some point the government can't keep bailing everybody out with funding. You know, already they've announced that the furlough is going to be reduced. And, you know, it is time for those businesses to establish a new norm, to adapt to the changes necessary and get back on their feet. And I think that that's the key role for the accountants now, because as they're perhaps getting less and less involved in the funding opportunities available, they've got to get much more involved in the advisory as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And so for me, that's the main thing.
And Mark Allen, final thoughts from you. What's coming up for accountants in 2020, do you think? What's left?
I think, well, for the accountants and clients alike, firstly, they've got to refocus on attractive business sectors. You know, this has caused absolutely massive disruption across certain sectors, you know, airlines, hotels, hospitality generally. So refocusing on the businesses sectors that are going to be attractive tomorrow. From the accountant's point of view, think about the value that clients are getting from you. Really analyse that and say, what are we doing for the clients that really adds value to them as we come out of this curve and all the support from the government fades away, because they can't keep borrowing money like any organisation. Can't just keep borrowing. And finally, to sum that up, as accountants, be commercial. Yeah, that's a sobering message there. Accounting firms are not always run as well as businesses, are they? So I totally get that. Do as I do, not as I say. Yeah, sure. Well, gentlemen, this has been terrific today. We really appreciate your insights and your time and your perspectives. And as you go back to your networks, I'm sure they'll be asking themselves too, as members, what is the value that we are getting? How well are we being served? And it is great that they are members of communities like yours where they can talk, share stories, admit their vulnerabilities in these very uncertain times. So I want to thank you for rocking up and sharing. And I wish you the best going forward as I hit this stop button.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Thank